Hey guys, well, now I'm going to be talking about all four of the Mission Impossible movies. I mentioned briefly my thoughts on these movies in my last DVD and Blu-ray video, but it had been a long time since I had seen two of the movies, and I had actually never seen one of them all the way through, so now I've rewatched every movie and thought I'd show you my thoughts. Oh, and I should briefly talk about the TV show. I've seen like 5 or 6 episodes of the first show, just the first season, and I think it's a very nice idea, very clever, but I honestly don't have the greatest desire to watch it. But if somebody has it on, would I watch it at least for a little bit? Because, as I said, I think it's a very nice idea, and they definitely have to be very clever, but I don't know. I think that the repetitive topic might get to me, or maybe too much of an episodic feel. I don't know. I haven't really watched that many shows like that, like the X Files. I've only heard bits about it, even though I do want to check that show out. Okay, so jumping into the first movie. This was actually the first one in the franchise that I saw, though I didn't understand it when I first saw it. But ultimately, I think this was an excellent movie because, we get introduced to the characters in a great way, and then things start to go wrong in just like every fashion, and then one guy has to try and prove his innocence, but he's in like pretty much the worst situation imaginable, although at the same time, this is pretty much the worst person possible to be on the most wanted list. So, yeah. And it just felt super tense. Like, how can this really get any better for Ethan? And plot points that they had in there. And then, yeah, just, I really enjoyed the thing. As for dislikes, I don't really have any comment, honestly. I really can't complain about anything that's in there, other than if you just don't like this kind of movie, or it didn't gel with you as much as it did for me. Hmm? So, 4.8 out of 5. Easily. I just love this movie. So now moving on to Mission Impossible 2. Now, arguably, this is the movie in the franchise that has the most backlash, because most of the people that I've talked to, which is not that many about this franchise, they generally agree that 2 is the worst. And I actually had never seen the movie all the way through until like a month ago, although I had seen pretty much all the second half of it, and when we're first introduced to Ethan in this movie. So I sat down and watched it, and I found it to be a nicely thought out movie, definitely some good ideas, and executed as well as you can in this situation, but I honestly didn't like it. Pardon me, but all the issues I have with it really are just personal flaws, to be honest, I think, because critique-wise, I can't totally complain that much because it had a very nice hook motivator at the start. Ethan does great in figuring out ways to get in there into the bad guy's fortress. It's interesting that he has a sort of relationship to the bad guy, although it's not really that great. And then I also like the action, and then a bit of the I can't describe it that well. Just like the confliction, can we really trust you? Questions, those were interesting, but I just feel like this movie, nothing was at stake for most of the movie. It was just mainly what could happen, not more like what is happening. In many ways, it felt kind of cliche because, like, well, the third act of the movie was just all action. Now, that doesn't have to be a bad thing because in the past I've complained about various movies not having like enough action because rarely ever, in my eyes, do I see a movie that has an action sequence that lasts more than 10 minutes. Now, this movie, in many ways, did have an action sequence that lasted longer than 10 minutes, but the problem with that is that it kind of made it feel like a James Bond movie, but this movie doesn't have the humor that's in most James Bond movies, even though I know that there is dark James Bond movies, which reminds me, I gotta get back on the Bondathon. Anyways, we're not going to talk about that. And then Tom Cruise, just like, I didn't feel for him in this movie, you know, nor the team, because I, for the life of me, have trouble recalling who the other guy is on this team, because I know that Ethan and Luther are there because they're in every Dawn movie, and I know who the chick is because so far there's always been a hot chick on the team, and she mattered in this movie's plot, just like the hot chick on the team did in the first film and the fourth movie. But the other guy, I really cannot remember who he was. Now, that doesn't have to be like a huge flaw, but there you go. So I think it's time that I just stop nitpicking this movie to ribbons, because it didn't work for me, but for many people it worked, so go right ahead and enjoy the movie. But for me, I'll give it 3, honestly, even though that's more my personal rating. Critique-wise, I'm not even going to bother giving it a rating. You can form your own opinion, okay? Sorry, my hand's hurting. Okay, so now for the third Mission Impossible movie. I did like this one because it felt like more was at stake in here. The humor in here was actually pretty good, and I also loved the like character interactions that took place here, because they apparently had a lot of A-list people, because there's Tom Cruise, obviously, there's Simon Pegg as Ben G, there's the guy who plays Luther, and then there's Morpheus as Ethan's boss, Lawrence Fishburne, if you don't know who I'm talking about. And then apparently a lot of people like the chick that played Julie in this movie. What else did I like about it? Again, what they did with figuring out the plots made sense, and then I also like how the action scenes in here felt a lot more brutal, because unlike the other two, you get the idea that Ethan might not be able to, you know, fight his way through the bad guys like he did in the first two movies. Although I did feel like the fight scene with the main villain was pretty weak, because Ethan defeated him as if it was just an ordinary villain. That's a major gripe that I've got with this movie. And it did feel like stuff was at stake, but it's different, because there isn't so much at stake, you know, like physically or what could happen after this scene. It's really just an emotional stake, because it's more the villain gets the protagonist's girl, and then Ethan tries to get her. Now, that's not a bad thing, but it does make the movie a little tougher, I think, to rewatch, because out of the 3 movies that I do like in this franchise, MI3 is the one I'm probably going to rewatch the least, even though I enjoyed it. And that pretty much sums my thoughts up about this movie, although, as I kind of alluded to when I was discussing the second one, the hot chick on the team didn't matter so much, although she did do a good job well, you know, following orders like with the other guy, although I don't remember their names, but it's not as bad as the random guy on the team from the second movie. And then as for MI4, well, I've kind of already spoiled my thoughts on this movie, but I liked it. You can probably guess why, just because what was at stake, it felt a lot more like the first movie, totally unsure of how Ethan is going to pull it out, and I also like how the movie starts out, even though I've complained about this with regards to other movies or shows in the past, as if it's several chapters later, because another weakness about MI3 just, yeah, how is that relationship going to pay off long term? Either Ethan has to quit IMF, or Julie has to die, you know? And that's what we think for most of this movie, which is not bad at all, because it gives Ethan, you know, a slightly more detached feel and explains why he's back. And I also like how this movie problems occurred for the other members in Ethan's team, because whoever plays the lead in the fourth Bourne movie, I can't remember his real name, but, you know, him having to originally got Ethan in the periods between the movies, yeah, that set something up for him. And then the hot chick in this movie, former partners or romantic partner, gets killed at the beginning of the movie, and she has to try and take down one of the villains who killed him. Yeah, so she's got something at stake. And then Benji, he's more important to IMF now, and yeah. So that was a huge plus. I liked also how this movie changed scenery because, we go from Russia, which has a lot of suburban areas, and then there's that desert place, and then there's all the fighting in the parking garage. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. And I also like how this time, for once, it came down to the last second. And also having the supposed, good guys also being a problem for Ethan and his team. Yeah, I like that, even though they did that in the first one, too. Oh yeah, I forgot to give MI3 a rating. 4, I think. For this one, I'm honestly leaning towards giving it 4.5, to be honest. Why am I not putting it to 4.8 like with the first one? I honestly don't know. But I do think I could say that this one, contrary to what I said in the DVD video, isn't my favorite MI movie, but it's my favorite MI sequel, without a doubt. And I did think it was a bit of a bummer that Luthor didn't get anything to do in this movie, but he doesn't necessarily have to be there. It's just, people identify this actor with this series, And I've heard that he's apparently coming back to be in the 5th one, along with Simon Pegg and whoever, like I said, was the other guy. 4th Bourne movie. Yeah, so I think that sums this video up. Later.